What's going on, everyone? Jonathan here with the Aymin Audio Experience. Today we're at the Innovative Packaging Solutions office, IPS, and we're talking with entrepreneur Carlos Cornejo. He shares with us how he went from pretty much penniless to owning a multi-million-dollar packaging company, and some of the stories that he shares with us are incredibly insightful in the journey of an entrepreneur and everything that it really takes to be successful. So I'm really excited to launch this and to share this all with you. Let's go ahead and head inside. What is up, everyone, on the podcast and on YouTube? My name is Jonathan. I'm the host of the Aymin Audio Experience, and I'm here with Carlos Cornejo. Carlos, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you, Jonathan, for having me.
Carlos, you are generous enough to welcome us into your space, and you run a packaging company called Innovative Packaging Solutions. And I want to get into a little bit of that and a little bit of your story. But first, tell us about yourself, kind of where were you born? Just give us a little bit about you and kind of how you began this whole journey into packaging and what you do as a career.
Again, thank you very much, Jonathan, for giving me this opportunity to share some of my experiences. It's a long story, if you will, and where it all started. I am Colombian-born, Salvadorian by right, American by choice. My father was a military politician in many ways in that era, and he was sent to a naval base in Cartagena, Colombia.
Okay.
My mom was there. I was born there.
So you said Colombian-born.
That was Colombian-born. I was born in Cartagena, Colombia. A little confusing as to how I got back into El Salvador, and I'm still dealing with that confusion because my dad never registered me actually as a Colombian. He just a document, a piece of paper that I needed to hunt down when I became an American citizen. It became a very complicated process. And was brought to El Salvador and grew up in El Salvador. My father was involved in government in the 60s. Prior to the revolution that took place and created quite a bit of challenges for the country.
I was going to say that's quite a volatile time. So
very much so.
Politics.
Very much so. My dad was from a very poor family. He had a very interesting history of how he was chosen to join what will be the equivalent to or close to what it is a military academy in El Salvador. So he became an officer. Officers will come in, military rule in those days throughout South America, if you read a little bit of the history. And so he was part of that group that governed in the 60s. Things got a little bit complicated as other ideologies became prevalent in the country. He was a little more centered in his views, a little left, leaning towards the suffering of people, and began to make a movement to balance what it was a rigid military political structure that ruled in those days.
I have a question about that really quick. In those days, was it more? Did it skew more left or more right? Very polarized, or were his viewpoints, which sounds like they were more centralized? Was that a popular place to be?
Most of the military academy officers that graduated from it was a very prestigious German-funded military academy. Came from very tough means, and so but power gave them a little extra, a different view of governing, and so it became very right, if you will, in the way that they managed. Plus, they owed a lot of favors to other people. Mm-hmm. The U.S. also was involved in supporting these military governments to help prevent the incursion of what is Marxism that was being infiltrated through Nicaragua, in our case, in El Salvador, from Cuba. Okay. And so that was an incentive for them to stay in power. My dad was more left, and he was concerned about the suffering of people, and he paid a price. And the price was that in the late 60s, things were beginning to get a little bit too hot. He began to express his content in how things were being managed in the government, and they told him that it was best for him to leave. It says you have a choice: either you go to Paris or you go to Los Angeles as a consul for El Salvador. So he decided to bring us to the U.S.
And
So
how
he
old were
was-
you at this time?
I was almost 16 years old.
16. Wow. So you really had your upbringing up until then. Once your father was in the military more, was your family making more money? Because you said they were very poor when you started out, but was your family at that point in your involvement with the military a little bit more established?
You know, being in the government gives you certain advantages, especially in those days. And those are the things that he began to feel a little bit uncomfortable about, and the abuses that power brought to a military government. Everyone wanted to climb that ladder, if you will, because you knew that there was going to be a benefit, and a financial benefit in some form. Corruption is the ugliest thing in government, and unfortunately it's very prevalent even to today in these countries. So we lived comfortably. There was never a abuse that I saw in my surroundings, but I did see it on my parents' military friends and how they climb up the ladder, which in many ways, they were patriots. They really were working hard for the government. I mean, crime was very minimal in those days because ruling was tough. I mean, you did something wrong there, you were going to pay the price. Mm-hmm. But again, those became ways of where power will be abused. And so overall, we came to the U.S. Very unprepared to deal with a new way of life, a new standard of living. And that standard of living dropped considerably from what we were living in El Salvador to coming here. And I give that I give my dad his well-deserved
Probably a lot of credit
because he could have done it differently, and we could have come here and live a standard that we were accustomed in the U.S. And so we struggled from the very, very get-go.
And you said you're 16 at this point.
16.
So you're also 16 here, high school or whatever. Is it a similar educational thing? I mean, you're coming with no friends. That's
living a military life is part of living the military life. You are moving continuously. So we did. Since I was born in Colombia, from there I went to a port city where he was captain of the port, and he went to another port, and they kept assigning him to new responsibilities, and we had to pack up and go. This was another moment, except that none of us spoke English. There was a language barrier from the get-go. We expected to come to America, to a world that was only you will see in the movies. Arrived in what now is what I call the Little San Salvador, and that's Pico and Union, downtown Los Angeles. And at the time, because he was the consul of El Salvador at the time, there were only 5,000 Salvadorians living in the U.S., 1971.
Wow.
The count right now is 2.5 million plus of Salvadorians here. So we are a big influence in the country back home.
Are those mainly, is that El Salvadorian presence mainly in the Los Angeles region, or as kind of people started to come to Los Angeles, they started to spread out? Is it kind of...
Right. Los Angeles was the place to come at the beginning, at least in the early 70s. And then they spread throughout the United States, East Coast in particular. Okay. Maryland is another hub of people from El Salvador.
And did you have family or other people that you came with, or was it just your immediate family?
Just my dad, my mom, and my sisters. We came. Yes.
Very cool. So, and are you from a big family?
Yes, we are.
Brothers, sisters?
I have 4 sisters.
Oh, wow.
No brothers. I'm the only boy in the family.
So we share that in common, except I have 3 sisters. So.
Oh, you understand?
You understand. We're the oldest, youngest?
I was
middle?
the second one.
Second. Okay. Very cool.
Yes.
Very cool. So you're here. You get to LA. You're 16. At what point do you go out on your own? Did you go to college? You go to school here? Kind of take us through the next phase in life.
The expectations were obviously high for a family like ourselves who had, and I hate to use the word privilege, but in certain ways you have certain advantages because of the power that was in being in government.
And then
But coming here,
expectations from other family
family
friends,
members.
people from back. Okay, yeah.
Yes, so there is certain expectations. I think for us coming here, the cultural shock was quite significant, that impacted the way we saw things. And being that we had to struggle to be able to find our way in a society that was evolving, if you will. I mean, we're talking about early 70s.
And in Los Angeles.
In Los Angeles. But by that time, we had moved to a city called Inglewood, California, and where it was the hub of what was then the busing law that was bringing students from other schools to integrate into school. We were in the middle of that. On top of trying to find ourselves, we were also trying to understand what was really going on with the school system. For us, it was simple. We had to learn English as quickly as possible. It was the mandate of the family, and we did. I think most of us were speaking English in about a year and a half.
Wow.
Never to really finish learning. You know, there's one of the things that we were taught is try to eliminate your accent as much as possible. You know, that stuck with me because assimilating was the way to go, to be able to step over that first obstacle and being in a foreign country.
That's interesting because, and we're going to get into this a little bit because I have some questions about this, but then you have experience later on in life with the Japanese culture.
Correct.
You know, with your wife, and so it's interesting that when you came to the U.S., and I think this probably is similar for a lot of people who were immigrating, that they were trying to adopt as much of the culture and everything of the U.S. and kind of get rid of the accents or get rid of, you know, certain things. I know for my family, when we're a couple generations here now, but when we came over from Italy, my grandfather wanted to change certain parts of our last name to make it sound distinctly not Italian because of some of the prejudice issues or some of the things. And of course, those are things that don't affect me. But looking back, you know, that is so amazing that is, like you said, kind of like a mandate. You know, get rid of the accent as soon as you can. You know, learn the language right away. Did that make you? Was that just kind of part of life, or did that make you resent either your upbringing or the American culture?
I don't think there was any resentment. It was the way to go. Okay. You know, you're presented with a challenge that you were not communicating, and you were afraid to communicate. And whatever little you have learned in your ESL class, which was really kind of a picnic of sorts, to go into the ESL classroom to kind of have a relief from being in classroom and you didn't understand a word it was saying. So you wanted to accelerate that process, and once you did, you begin to realize that you were communicating effectively enough that people will not look at you a little different. Then you realize that one positive effort, it was beginning to show results because the reaction was beginning to change, and a sort of acceptance, if you will, to deal with someone who actually speaks English.
As we get to your entrepreneurial adventures a little bit later on, was this something that started for you very early, being entrepreneurial? I mean, were you selling lemonade, or were you doing something in school, flipping things, or how were you making money at an early age? Is that something that's kind of started that you knew this is what I have to do, or is that something that came later?
That's an interesting question, and yes, I must have been 5-6 years old. And my grandma, it was very typical to have neighborhoods, and where in the garage they'll turn it into a little mom-pop shop where they sell bakery and stuff that you need quickly. You can walk to next door and buy for your needs. And so they used to have me there as a young boy and take care of the store, if you will, while they go to the restroom or moving quickly. And so I had in first grade we had a class, wood shop class, and where you cut this plywood and turn it into different things. And I made this plant holder that goes in the wall with various layers of plywood. And so I went to my aunt, who was a teacher at school, in kindergarten school, and she had one of those old copying machines you had to use your hand to turn the pages, and it will come out. So I asked her to make me hundreds of copies of that because I wanted to lay it on the plywood and start cutting myself, and I was going to sell it in my grandma's shop. So that was my very first, I wanted to be in business moment that I never forgot. It's clear on my mind. And I sort of draw a little bit from that experience every time I felt like, things are not working out. Because it takes that moment that, you can do this feeling. And so I draw from that experience.
Well, and in that experience, was it more about just doing it and it was the fun of creating something and then selling it? Or was it something like you started making some money and realized, oh, wow, I can buy other things with this or whatever?
I can't define the financial gain.
Well, and you're 5 or 6 too, maybe.
Yeah,
that's a little...
but I saw the purpose of the little shop and the earnings that were coming in, and that they were dependent on the earnings of that little shop. So I was aware of the reason for the shop. For me, it was just this something that clicked and said, you can do this, and I moved in that direction. But I never took the financial component as a main factor of doing it.
Gotcha. So then when you come to the U.S., were you doing anything? I guess at what point did you get a job or start, your own thing, a little side hustle?
So at that point, I knew that things were falling apart in terms of the way I had envisioned our family to grow older, if you will, and graduating from high school, moving into college, parents being always there to guide you through the process. It didn't work out that way. Things happened. My dad was removed from the position he was. Political.
In the U.S.
In the U.S.
Okay.
The one that became president in 1973 was someone that my dad had removed in some time of his tenure and his position in El Salvador, and he came to visit at that time and asked my dad, "Do you remember me?" My dad goes, "Yes." 2 weeks later, he was gone.
Wow.
That's the nature of being in positions in government, and so he had to leave, and we were left with the question: do you want to return? We were diplomatic visa, yeah.
Okay.
Diplomatic visa that we had, and was going to expire, and we needed to make a decision. So things were very, very complicated politically then. I would say about half of my dad's military group had been assassinated already.
Wow.
The military was the first target that the revolutionaries were targeting.
Was that a fear that you had growing up? I mean, was that right in your face even as a younger person?
Even coming here, our last name was to be kept quiet, and not to mention it to anyone unless it was necessary. Because of that, and so we decided to stay. So that changed everything. There was no money for anything. Everybody was on their own, my sisters, including myself. And so college was out of the question. And I graduated high school, a great experience in learning a little bit of the culture and the issues that were challenging the country at the time. And somebody called me and says, I have a job for you. 18 years old, 19 years old, I think. And I was a stock boy. It's such a description at the time of what a coat hanger sorter, if you will, in the back of the store where, the hangers that people bought the clothes, the hangers will stay, and they will be all mixed with different types of hangers. I will sort them out. And
was it in a warehouse or was it like a retail store?
It's a retail store.
Okay.
A retail store. I'm sorry. It's a retail store, and I worked there quite a bit and climbed the ranks into assistant manager, eventually manager, and eventually, after a big effort into doing all I needed to do to make an impact on my employers and everyone around me, I must have been about 23. They offered my boss, who owned the franchise. It was a franchisee, ladies and children's clothing. Retired, so
and this is in Inglewood.
And this is in Inglewood.
Okay.
And they offered me the franchisee, and I thought, hello, this is good. So I did, And so I stayed there I did that for about, I would say maybe 6 years, 7 years.
You were
very tough
in business for
retail.
yourself, in
Yes.
a way. I mean, because you
Yes.
were managing, so you owned that franchise.
Yes.
You bought it from her.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Wow.
The buying arrangement, there was no investment. They needed someone to take care of. They were going to transfer, still have the ownership, and yet I will be responsible for everything else.
Okay.
Related to the operation.
It's an incredible experience, though, giving you kind of that natural experience to be able to run your own thing, but maybe without some of the hefty, like, purchasing part of the front side of it. It's incredible.
Exactly. So it worked well. Always working very hard. Even though I owned the franchisee at a very early age, I also went and helped the other shops with inventory. Once every 6 months, they will have inventory count. I will go to San Diego, LA, and different places to help and earn extra money. Mm-hmm. There was always that extra. What else can I do? I had this opportunity. It's great, but somehow in my mind it was limiting. So I needed to always have something else, aside from the fact that I had gotten married very young.
Mm-hmm. When did you get married?
I was almost 21.
Wow, that's incredible.
That added more reasons why I needed to have 2 jobs almost, and I did. Even though I had this business, I will close at 6 o'clock, and there was a theater in the same block, so I will lock up, run to the theater, and work until 11 o'clock at night.
Wow, and what were you doing in the theater?
I will say the ticket. They had a little ticket machine, and I was in the booth.
That is incredible. Something that I've found consistently is that people who really accomplish a lot in their life, and people that I try to learn from, including yourself, and for any of you who are watching or listening, I've known Carlos for some time now, and I really do. You inspire me, and I've been able to, learn a lot from your experiences and your guidance and your counsel that you've given me. But one thing that I've noticed repeatedly is anyone who does accomplish a lot and is a success is constantly hungry and looking for kind of the next little bit that they can do. And it's always that mindset of just a little bit more and a little bit more. And it's amazing to me that even though you owned the franchise, right? And you could have probably at the time thought, I'm kind of a big shot. And I bet there were people who were older than you working for you. But here you are locking up the store, running across the street, and going into another position that was lower in status than the position that you currently had. And I think that takes a humility and a work ethic and a hustle that is truly incredible. And I think that younger people nowadays, including myself, it's hard to think of doing that as a way to add extra revenue. You want to do something that's kind of in similar line with where you're at or where you think you're at position-wise. So that's incredible, and I didn't know that. So
once you're committed to that vision that in my early years I learned. I read. I like to read. I'm not a specific reader for specific sections that I feel that is going to give me the help that I immediately need. I'm a very simple type of person. I look for simple signals, and I grab onto those signals, and I use them. Somebody gave me a book when I was 8, 9 years old, Positive Thinking. I'm sure it's still being printed today. The one part of the book talked about visualization. This is in 1964.
Wow.
Visualization. Where do you see yourself being in the future? And that I put the book down, I'm sure, and I just try to figure what is it that I wanted. And ever since then, I always go back to that visualization and remind myself of what is it that I wanted to do. There was nothing specific. There were no big houses in front of the beach and all these expensive cars and everything else. There was this feeling of achievement that stayed with me. Mm-hmm. And you can't be thinking about it all the time, but it's so embedded in you, is that the correct word, that you draw it when you know that you need it the most, but mostly you're walking in that direction. So you don't hesitate. In my experience, and like you were explaining that, I would do it just about anything. You don't think twice and you go. I've done the swap meet. In the old days, the swap meet was a big thing. You had to rent your own little square, bring in your car with stuff that you bought, and put out there and start selling the stuff. I've sold what was the advent of those days of albums. Japanese had developed these very unique albums. I was selling albums. I was selling jewelry on the side. I had jewelry in my car. I had albums in the back seat. There was always something to be done, and people would ask me. I said, "What is it that you're doing? And what is it that you want in our life?" And I said, "I don't know, but this is what I do.
I'm going.
I'm going." And there's something to say about that, because friends began to wonder if I was okay, because there was always a story. There was always something was going to happen, and things didn't turn out always the way that you thought you would. And that's when they began to realize. I said, maybe it's stuff. Somebody talk to Carlos and then get a stable job and do the right thing. But it's that desire to that you can do more than you are already doing that kept me moving and exploring a lot of different possibilities in business. So I knew the other area is, and I'm sure your listeners will relate to this. And when you walk into a place, usually it's a car dealership, and you see these guys are really in tune with their delivery, their way of showing you, leading you to making that decision that they want you to do with buying a car. In this case, you call that the natural salesman. Mm-hmm. And in general terms, I'm still the nicest guy, but I'm this guy that there's no way, Carlos, you're gonna sell anything. You're too nice. And I always knew that was the case. I was too nice to actually be an aggressive individual to be able to succeed in business. And I remember the book. I said, no, I'm going to prove that nice guys end up first as well. Because as the old saying, nice guys end up last. Yeah. And I am walking proof that can be done. It requires a lot more from you because you don't have the natural desire to succeed like other individuals, and they just go and move forward.
And maybe it's not as much the natural desire to succeed, but are you talking about that kind of aggressive, in-your-face charisma that's like, this kind of you need to make a decision, pressure environment? Or is that what you're talking about from a sales perspective?
The energy that is necessary to toy with different levels of the annoying salesperson, and then the middle annoying, then the one that people feel, hey, I can trust this individual. He's actually telling me a good story. He's coming through. He's transparent. He's being honest, and he's laying it all out for me to make that decision. He's not making the decision, or she's not making the decision for me. That's after. It's just that energy to get to that point. How you decide to be, we have good attorneys and bad attorneys, and good salespeople, car salespeople, and good packaging people, and you have them in all different levels, which began to really show me that you can still be a nice guy, have a good message, have that work ethics, and have the people, whether it's negotiating with your wife, with your kids, negotiating with your boss, and negotiating with a potential customer that's going to give you that push to get you into the world that you want to live in. So once you begin to realize that being nice and being aggressive can go hand to hand and provide a good product, and I knew that was something that I needed to polish. I never would want to come in across too strong.
And so going back really quick to your wife, so you said you got married pretty early, and when you got married at that time, was she working as well? Did you have kids right away? Did you wait?
My wife was a very influential person in my life, and continuing through the toughest times. I don't want to sound I'm the old alpha male in charge, but those were different times, different cultures. Japanese women had a place and a very specific role in their marriages, and when the description of behind a successful man there's a good wife, is something like that. And she was very, very active in making sure that my worries were minimal at home, which is important to be able to continuously keep focus in the prize at hand, if you will, because going on your own is the beginning of hundreds of obstacles that come in your way. And to add obstacles within some parts of which you don't have any control, and that's the family life, the wife comes in to sort that out, to make sure that there's an actual place that you can actually go and unload or relieve and or talk it through, and wake up in the morning to try to get back again and figure how are you going to survive that day, because business is about that. Halfway in understanding that I had made that commitment fully, I knew that was coming my way, and I was prepared to deal with every obstacle that came. And so it makes a significant impact to have a person that understands, your partner to understand.
I totally agree with that. I know in my marriage, sometimes even having a sounding board to just say something to, and you hear yourself say
Yes.
it, and then my wife will give me her perspective, and then it's sometimes a counter perspective. So there's a little bit of that dialogue that goes on that really helps kind of create a solution. And like you said, you are ready the next day to get back and go at it and have a refresh perspective.
Absolutely. And even just listening,
Mm-hmm.
you know, you need to unload all those emotions that are going throughout the day, because they are a little, and I don't want to take away the challenges that people have in the day-to-day jobs. You know, not everybody wants to jump into the challenging world of being on your own, and there's no paycheck every week. But when you realize that every day is tough, and you have someone that's going to listen to you, and it may give you a direction someday, that's plenty, because it gives you that space, and where you want to keep focus and doing your best to find ways to overcome all the challenges. Definitely. And then the children, of course, are part of your life, you know, and you have to juggle in there.
You had them early. So when did you have them? Because you said you.
I was very young, 22. I think I had Caroline first, 22, wow. 23.
That's incredible.
And so I had the full package of challenges that I created on my own, if you will. And balancing was very tough. I tell my kids nowadays that they have families. That there's a way to fight and balance a family life and business life, but there's always a price to pay. Mm-hmm. And that is almost inevitable, in my opinion. But you have a chance to keep focus on when that happens, that you're going to be there to help them deal with that a reaction to all that, ignoring, if you will, or not ignoring, but overlooking some of the challenges the family was going through. But you couldn't lose sight of what you were doing, because you knew that the result and the benefit that was going to come from that effort that you knew you were risking, including your family, was going to bring some good benefits for them.
I think that's so well said. I would say struggle similarly, and it sounds like there is kind of that tension, mm-hmm. because anytime that you're focused on the business, and the business is kind of like another child, so you're kind of giving this one child all this attention, but then you're not able to be there for some of the other things. And I think that is a struggle that people face when they are so focused on being successful in one area, but really there's huge payout, there's huge benefits, and there's an incredible legacy that you've created. And I've seen, any times that we've spent with your family, I mean, it's really incredible what you've created, and the type of not only environment that you're able to provide now for them, but just the legacy and the stories that you're able to tell your grandkids about where you came from and where they came from. I think roots them, and maybe they wouldn't, they're younger now, and maybe they wouldn't say that now, but later on, that's inspiring, and I think that is incredible. So anyway, let's go and transition a little bit more into your experience in the packaging world. Obviously, you're an entrepreneur now at 24. At this point, it sounds like you're married and you have 1 or 2 kids, maybe?
2, 1 on the way.
Okay, so you're managing the franchise. How do you transition? So you're managing the franchise and doing some other odd jobs as well. How do you transition from doing that to getting into packaging, and then take us through that to where you are today?
One of the components of my life story was that I was always in the right place at the right time, and I always consider that you work your best and hardest to put yourself in those conditions. And when the city began to change, in the retail shop, shoplifting, people walking in with guns to steal their money from the register was very common. I knew it was time for me to start looking for an alternative, because packing a gun in those days in a retail store was not the kind of life that I wanted to live. And so I was approached by someone else that had a retail shop. It was a parochial school uniform, so private school uniform at the time, and I took the job, and I worked there for a couple of years. In the meantime, my wife was working, and she was working for a Japanese company. I didn't know what exactly the product was, but it turns out it was packaging. And so the wife of the owner in Japan, it was a $100 million company in Japan. They had a subsidiary sales marketing office here in LA. Now my friendly competitors. Asked her for dinner and to bring the husband and the kids out. And Boku was months old. He could sit in the booster chair in the restaurant. And she came over, and I was doing my thing. The Japanese, I had studied Japanese a couple of years, and so we engaging. And
Japanese. Oh, so you started speaking Japanese a little bit.
yeah, at the time I had studied Japanese a couple of years. Although I didn't go to college, I did my self-educating bit. The times that I had, I used to wake up at 4:00 in the morning and study, because that was the only time I could study. And then I was at City College and taking a few classes, and Japanese was one of them. And so the lady flies back to Japan. My wife calls me to the shop and says, Carlos, Mrs. Mano, that was the lady's name, is coming back. She wants to talk to us. And I thought, well, that sounds like you probably want to have you end up going to Japan or something. So we met again, and they offered me a job. So that was a little strange.
Doing packaging.
Yes.
In the U.S.
In the U.S.,
okay.
Working for the company. She was here, in the subsidiary here. So I went to Japan. I said the only way, because I've heard all the politics that was going on, like any other company, was going on at her shop. I said I don't want to walk into where I don't know very much about the product itself. The only way I will take the job is if I go to Japan and learn exactly what this is all about. And they shipped me back. They shipped me to Japan for 13 weeks.
Wow.
So
With
I was
your
in
wife?
Japan. No, myself.
Okay, so just yourself. You go for 13 weeks.
Right.
And you learn everything that you can.
Yes.
About this company.
Yes.
Wow. Was that a culture, another culture shock?
Yes.
You came from El Salvador to the U.S., culture shock, but then again.
Yes.
Wow. Okay.
The food was no problem, but after 10 weeks of eating the same thing, because I was working at the plant, the manufacturing facility, and Asian companies, the manufacturing offers living quarters to employees who live far away. So I was staying in that place. So I had to do my own laundry, which I never did. It was very funny how my uniform came out all wrinkled, but I had to wear it. It was at the plant that I was working. The food was beginning to get a little bit too much for me. I was an odd individual in a very small town in south of Tokyo. Foreigners are called gaijin. Foreigners, the word. And so every time I would walk down the street on a Sunday or then my day off, I would see little kids poking their mom and say, Mom, look, gaijin, gaijin, gaijin. And I'm like, okay. So you live through that because there were no foreigners in that city. The language obviously was difficult and in the technical level. But I came out understanding quite a bit of the actual product and the culture itself. Somebody told me, and those are one of the things that I pick up throughout my life. There are moments, that you cling on to. And one of them was that, this is Carlos, because I asked him, I said, look, why am I carrying these gallons of ink into this? What is this really going to do for me? He says, Carlos, if I wanted to hire what is the terminology of those days in Japan was a messenger boy, it would have been a lot easier for me. But we want you to be in front of a customer as if you were the president of the company, because every decision that you will make, you will know how it affects the chain of production all the way down to delivery. And I thought, I get it, and I'm on. And so those things, those are experiences and moments that that stay with you, and I bring that also into what is the same method of running a business in Japan with a little flavor of the Hispanic flavor, the American flavor, and the global flavor to my friendly competitors now. And so, that was a great experience. And so came back and worked there for 10 years. Obviously, my inner needs of breaking away began to focus into the packaging itself. It became a more technical, more direct and influential product that was being seen by just about any supermarket. Our company has, and I can say that, a package in just about every supermarket or shop in the United States has something that has gone through this office.
Your company, IPS, yeah.
Yes.
Well, and that's cool. I mean, maybe we can mention some of it a little bit later on if you're willing. But when I first met Carlos and you first kind of talked to me about some of the brands, they started jumping out at me off the shelves, and it's true, from Costco to any of your local supermarkets, the Vons, Ralph's, anything like that. I mean, they are everywhere because the brands that your company now represents are these massive, incredible brands.
Yes.
So at what point then, you're there with the company for 10 years, at what point do you start your own thing?
Because I was even at the time, I was I must have been about 32, Boku's age, 33 years old, and they knew that they thought I was too soft as a salesperson. And I resented that, because in my inner self, I know I was working hard. It's like saying, you need to muscle up a little bit. And you go to the gym every day, but it's not happening. The same thing, I felt a little bit offended in that statement. And so I continue my work in developing that confidence. But they shift me to packaging, manufacturing, and selling to. They developed a pet food product. In those days, pet food was becoming big, and they brought in an equipment. They began to fill product into packaging to sell on somebody else's brand, and they wanted me to run that operation. And I knew that's not what I wanted. I knew that I had fallen in love with packaging. I knew that I was making inroads. They couldn't see it. I believed that I was moving forward, and they were not going to deliver for me. So I moved on. I had to move on, and I went to work for the competition for a couple of years until I found my way into the one place that I knew I was going to work for me. And through all that, it led to where I knew that I had developed relationships in the field. We talked a little bit before we started about advertising and how do you get to reach so many well-known brands in the industry. It's relatively a small market, if you will, and I knew that having that relationship with people and delivering the goods that they expected and more, and always being transparent, honest, hardworking, being there anytime they needed you. The manufacturing runs sometimes 24 hours a day, and if you could show up at 3 o'clock in the morning or 4 because they needed you to be there, you were there with a smiling face and do it, ready to take on the world. I didn't find that to be rocket science, but I will hear comments as, Carlos, I can't believe you do that. The other guys, not even close. It was hard for me to believe that actually somebody that is living off a customer's benefit and you're not going to respond 24 hours a day. It's just unheard for me. And so that created a reputation that they knew that if you talk to Carlos, you're going to get what you need and beyond. And that developed that relationship. And I began to develop a lining up my customers, and I just needed a supplier to be able to help me through and provide them what they needed. And my supplier was my friend and competitor who I used to work for. They saw the yen, Japan's economic collapse came in the early 1990s. So they were very smart, and they built the plant in China. They were the very first flexible packaging company that was going to be exporting competitive price, well, top quality, printing in Japan is the best, into the United States. They already had Nissin Foods is the instant noodle. They do all that. So I went to them. I said, look, help me out. He says, you're in.
Because they already had a little bit of a relationship with you, so they knew you were hardworking.
They knew me. They knew I was going
reputation.
to deliver, yes.
Yeah.
The problem is that we didn't do our math. And I blame them, and they blame me, and we blame each other. We didn't do our math. I wasn't going, the numbers that they were selling me, the product was not going to give me enough to be able to survive. And I collapsed. That was my first fall. So the life goes that you need to, and my customers are lined up. Can you imagine waking up in the morning knowing that you have no supply, your customers are waiting for an answer? And I had about $150 left on my budget to go. There was a packaging show in Vegas in 2001. September 10th, 2001. I run into the show. I run into this nice young man, now a good friend of ours. And we both happened to have worked for the same company, him in Hong Kong and I with my friendly competitor who was my employer at the time.
Wow. September 10th.
He says, September 10th. He says, we're on. You're on. We come and see you Thursday. I return. I wake up, turn on the TV, September 11th. The whole world was kaput. My chances of, it's done. And here you are crying for all those people who had just been killed, and here's your business, and your customers sitting around waiting. So you have to wake up and you have to react. And that's where the tests, that come, the training that you receive through all the challenges that you go through, including being born in another country. I wish I would have born in El Salvador. What business do I have in Colombia? I tell my parents. And so all that came into play there, the moment, a crucial moment of something that you wanted to do, something has slipped out of your hands. They're ready to go with you. Your customers are waiting for an answer. And it all worked out. 2 weeks later, they came. They visited the customers. Customers had actually laying artwork. Everything has an artwork, or the things that we do prior to going printing. They were handing down. So here are the artworks. Here are the artworks. They couldn't believe that they actually had met someone who, these people were waiting for the supplier that Carlos would choose to go out and make their product. It's coming. And that was the beginning of a relationship with what is now a current supplier. And
so they basically trusted you,
yes,
from their current relationship with you to handle their needs with a supplier. But it sounds like there was a little bit of a waiting time where you were trying to find who that supplier was, but they trusted you so much because of how you had delivered for them in the past.
Yes.
That is incredible. Wow.
Yes. So the supplier, the family, very nice family. We were a family operated at the time.
And this is the one this is the family that you met in Las Vegas.
In Las Vegas.
At the packaging show on the 10th.
Yes.
Oh wow. Okay.
They had never exported any goods from China. They had all domestic, Chinese domestic customers. We were their trampoline to spread throughout the world. Once they, through us, spread their wings into the United States, Australia, New Zealand, Europe, England, Africa. Because the first question they ask you is, do you do anything outside China? And they said yes, and these are the brands you're in. We had no influence in those markets. We were concentrated in the U.S. And so they did very well, built a brand new plant. We were growing every year. Ever since then, we have been growing.
And just so I can understand correctly, so your position as the packaging company is a liaison between the supplier who is creating the actual film or what the material that's inside, and this is not flexible. I don't think as the definition. Flexible is the bags and all of that. But they supply the actual material. You're then working with the client to make it look, appear, feel, with the label and all that, everything how they want. So you're that middle component between the two. Is that correct?
Right. The way sometimes people describe what we do in simple terms, it really is buy and sell. It is a very complex. There is a little bit of rocket science on what the different materials and different combinations of materials are for different food specifications. Very, very crucial to make the right selection. Then there's the printing. The moment then when consumers have that split second walking through the aisle and see the quality printing that stands out above the competitors. We had a mission early when we realized that the world needed IPS to be able to bring some form of competitive, highest quality material that is forbidden to small or medium-sized companies, because the quality of printing that we do is the highest possible, and the only way that they could buy it here in America will be if you're one of the multinational companies that have gazillions of rolls being printed at one time. So they were delegated to lower, less expensive printing that didn't stand up to the quality that the big companies could. So they were right off the bat at a disadvantage. We came with smaller volumes, low cost of printing, cylinders to print each color, very competitively, and sometimes beyond what we could do. But we know that they had a chance to win in the marketplace and award us with loyalty, which we enjoyed with quite a bit of the customers that we had that started with nothing and built a nice brand and great volume. And so, yeah, it's seems like anyone can actually come in and create that connection between manufacturing and customers. But there is a lot more that goes into this. So much that the manufacturers come to us and they have deep pockets. They have a lot of money that they could establish a marketing office like we do here. But there's one thing, and I always tell them, I say, what is the difference between you and your competitors, Carlos? I said, they don't have a Carlos. And I don't mean that because I understand exactly. Throughout all my years, I have learned to be able to be sensitive to people's needs, mm-hmm. and be able to deliver without me losing my head of how powerful that is, really, because it creates, it has the possibility of me losing my focus because of the brands that I service. They are really just people like you and I, the people that are making the decisions to go with you or not. They have families, they have emotions, they have everything else, and if I treat them the same way and I continue to be the same way, they're going to always perceive that I'm with them. And that is the sentiment that I try to communicate to my people, to have the same feel about them. And I truly feel that loyalty that we have with our customers come from that day-to-day contact. When they hear our voices and they understand that we understand what their needs are. So that part of how to build a business from the early to actually being in there, obviously challenging, but it teaches you a lot about how everything works and how the things that you need to adjust to better yourself and really communicate to customers.
It sounds like a lot of what anchored you is, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but a lot of what anchored you is that initial feeling that the clients had, your customers had for you, which was loyalty, because they knew that you would deliver and you did have their best interests at heart. And it sounds like, with you said, they don't have a Carlos, right? The clients that you have and the people that you serve know that when they're hiring you or your team, they're getting a team of people, and you, as the leader of that team of people, that are committed to delivering whatever their expectations are, whatever has been communicated, even if that means showing up at 3 or 4 in the morning. Mm-hmm. And that has kind of been this stream of gold that's run through your mindset and how you treat your clients. So many times, I've seen in business so far, and I know you probably have as well. You mentioned it actually in some of your experiences earlier, but people just are not willing to provide that level of service. They're not willing to go the extra mile. And so when you have someone that's that committed and that's on fire to, no matter what, to take care of those clients' needs, that's someone you want to do business with as a customer. And so that's incredible. That's so impactful. So if you're talking to someone, and this is a question that I like to ask, many people in our generation, whether they're Ryan or myself or anyone younger, maybe in high school, college, early college, graduating from college, people, we're thinking about what we're going to do with the rest of our life. What are we going to do? You know, and you even said when you were younger, what am I going to do? I don't know. I'm just doing it. I'm hustling. I'm working hard. How do we, many people like want to be successful, or they want to find what their career is, but how do you figure that out, and what's the best thing to do? I mean, how do you start building something in your life? Do you just try to do whatever you can do, or do you think getting an education and really working at something for a long period of time is good, or jumping around to different things? What's your opinion on that? What advice would you give to someone?
Yeah, that's a pretty interesting question. You know, as you were describing it, many emotions come into play as to which way is the right way to go.
Well, it's a big question, so cover
yes,
however
it is, and a good one, because I think every young person, or even middle-aged person, who wants to start something that gives them now maybe the possibility of doing it, is the first and foremost is knowing that you're walking into the biggest obstacles you ever encounter in your life. And if you accept that fact and you're ready to go, jump and go for it, and never let go of that vision that you should have created, or what you want to, most likely you already have, since you want to jump in as to what you want to succeed. A young person going to school is part of life, just about, and for a lot of people is the best thing, knowing that you have that entrepreneurship mind. The more education, the better chances, not to be caught into being too analysis of paralysis, if you will, that you still have that free will of jumping into something no matter what you are. As the example of me having the franchisee and working as a ticket guy in the theater, that you know that you are going to do just about everything, and have that story well versed in your mind as to why you're doing what you're doing, because people are going to ask you, why are you suffering, why are you struggling, why are you doing what you're doing? And when you begin to communicate, and the more you begin to communicate that message, it gives you that, it helps you that confidence as to why you're doing it, because you tend to lose the reason why, the obstacles. Very few people that I know in my life that have gone in business have a story that says, I made it and I had no problem at all. Mm-hmm. It's unheard of. The reality is that you have to be ready. To those who feel like myself, we were too soft and too nice, and I'll never amount to anything, you will have your moment. Everybody has these moments, and that you can actually conquer that, not the financial gain or the material objectives. We all want everything nice in life at every level, but there's that reason why you want to do that. For me, it was winning. I want to win. I want to win at every cost possible. That was going to bring me satisfaction to achieve the things that I always wanted to do.
Did you feel like an underdog?
Always.
A lot of
Always.
times?
It's, for me, it was challenging. You gotta think I'm the only Hispanic successful in the packaging industry in the United States. That brought challenges for me. Mm-hmm. Everyone sees me always on the way out, and every time I detect that, I will double up my efforts and come on top.
That inspires you, it sounds like.
Yes.
You want to win.
I want to win. There's no way that I am going to be thought of anything less than that. So when you come into that state of mind, it's easy to rebound fast, because you need to. It's not how many times you fall, it's how quickly you get up, and that is a technique that you need to work. And every time you fall down, it's hard to say, hey, feel good, because you're gonna keep on falling, right? But every one of those experiences come into play in who I am today, because I can think of it, and I don't have time to go through all my failures that I had in my life, including bankruptcies. So everything that is around you, you have to be ready to take on as a matter of part of what you have chosen to do, and there's a way to climb that mountain.
Was there a point that you felt like, I don't want to say you've made it, but a point where you felt like, wow, we just made our first $1 million, or wow, now we have $10 million, or wow, this was a really good year, or man, maybe you got to buy a car or a bigger house, and was there any point where you kind of could take even a little small breath that felt like, this is paying off now? all my years of hard effort, I'm starting to, the Tesla or anything, even something material like that.
Funny you mentioned the Tesla. To me, it represents something that I'm not too. I enjoy it. It was my daughter who sort of led me into that car, and I appreciate her doing that. Had it been my choice, there would be no Tesla there. For me, the material component of it it's going to come. So when it comes, you knew that it was coming. It's the winning. Okay, so I already have it. This is my trophy, right? I don't walk around with the trophy that I won when I played basketball, and I bring it every time I go somewhere. You put it on a shelf, and you move on to the next trophy, and there's always something else to win. So when you look at the value of life, it's beyond the material. I'm not a religious person. I'm a seeker. I'm always trying to find new ways to see the world. And I came to the conclusion that people need to have very simple messages. People don't need to hear, like last night I was watching the politicians talk about the solutions that they have for the world. And the common man like myself and millions of others can't possibly grasp all what they're talking about. We need simple messages, and those messages went, and I recognize them throughout my life. Somebody told me, say, Carlos, I heard that you always talk about what a lousy salesman you are. Let me give you a piece of advice. He says, and I'll never forget this. He says, selling is not rocket science. All you have to do is knock the door, pick up the phone, and ask for the business. Bingo.
That's so true. That's so true.
And if you do that every day, and you wake up and people are shutting the doors before you even get to knock on the door, and you keep on knocking on the doors, the benefits are coming. The benefits of financial gain, buying all the toys that you want. But if you really look beyond what there is, the material aspect of life, there's so much to conquer. Right now I'm, over 60. I'm trying to pass on this to the next generation. I accomplished that, and I maybe thought myself a couple of times, but my next move is how am I going to leave everything so that the next generation can have a chance for myself. So that's my target now, and I'm done. Whether I live in a small house or somewhere where it's just enough to live, I'll be fine with it, because I went through a process of putting myself on my own choices, married early, not going to college, having had the normal life, and then throughout the life trying to find myself, the energy that came in through every experience that went through, especially when you fall down.
Was the material stuff important?
No.
Sorry for interrupting, but was it ever something that you saw other people had, and then even younger, and then as you got older, you kind of matured into this perspective, or was it always not, the material part never really had that much value?
Right. I mean, we're human beings. We have needs. We have tendencies. We have backgrounds that have shown us different ways of living or toys to have. I'm not going to deny that, I like to drive a nice car, for example, since we're talking about a Tesla. But it's not everything. That's not giving me anything. Mm-hmm. That is returning into something that is going to be value for my life, especially towards the end of your cycle. So no, I sort of rose above that component, and I'm happy I did, because it could have changed my way of thinking. I might be completely different. I'm accepting that I am a passive guy. Mm-hmm. The passive aggressive type. And I'm good with that, because I know I can turn on the switch to the aggressive and be able to go out there and try my best to win my objectives. But the value of the material component for me was not very significant.
That's amazing. I feel like so often people, at least the younger people that I'm around, a lot of times the focus is financial gain, maybe, and it's trying to figure out what matches up with the level of success that you want to have. And you and there's, I think, that advice out there as well. I just remember being in college and trying to go down the list of degrees and match up the level of the degree that I thought that I wanted to get with how much money that you could approximately make, and then seeing if I could do that job. So I'd go down and I'd look, and there's engineer, and there's different things, and minimum salary, okay, 50,000. Well, I'd like to make a little more than that. What's the top tier? And thinking about it like that. And I remember that. And then it's interesting going into business, that kind of faded away, and the objective just became winning at the different tiers, and kind of like beating a level in a video game almost. It just became the next level and the next level and the next level. The analyzing success like that in terms of finances drifted.
Right.
And I still have a lot of maturing in that realm to do, definitely. But that's interesting to hear you say. That's a
Yeah, and you know, when you jump into or you're toying with the idea of going on your own, you have to take an inventory yourself. Mm-hmm. You know, and as I said earlier, things are not complicated. But there's some key things that you need to do. If you invest in a proper attire that is above what most people consider to be acceptable, let's say, and then you bring it up a notch up, and then you present yourself much better, you're projecting as long as you're not
lying,
bragging about yourself or looking yourself. You want to project because you want that projection to open up the mind so that you can tell your story.
Mm-hmm.
So
that's beautifully said.
Anything that you look around and what you do, you know, the accent, for example. I mean, to me, I knew that was going to be a detriment, and I forced. And most of my friends still have a very heavy accent because we came when we already had our language set. And 16 years old, we spoke Spanish perfectly. So turn it into an English language plus the accent was challenging. They never bother with it, so they come out quickly as foreigners, even though they've been here 45 plus years. For me, it was important because I knew that was going to give less thought of the person saying, the heavy accent, and then that's they're trying to figure out. So they're not opening your mind. So your message has to be even bigger to be able to communicate what is it who you are and what you want to accomplish. Because people want to help people. Mm-hmm. If you communicate directly, openly, straightforward, with a smile, even though you're feeling like I many years felt like my whole world was falling apart, but you still have to smile, then they want to help you. I never forget that person, same person that told me that about knocking the door. He said, people want to help people. For the 99% of the time, people are nice. You know, when I see the political divide that is right now, it makes us seem like everybody's out to get everybody. But in reality, human beings are very nice people. You just have to ask for it. So when you look at those little things that you don't find in a book, you know, you find in people's experience, and you apply them, because they say, hey, Dad, why am I going to wear a tie? It's your choice, but you can actually look presentable enough that opens the mind of the person that you're in front, because they're going to see there's something different about you. And that is not because you, as I said earlier, you want to project what a great guy you are or a great girl you are. Rather, you just want them to open up a little bit to listen to your story. So there are many things that a young person can do doing that self-evaluation.
That's powerful. There's so much stuff I want to later on. I want to go back and listen to some of that, because I do think that people do want to help other people, but sometimes it's the getting started, it's the picking up the phone, it's the knocking on the door. But what you're saying about your presentation, I think, is very, very important. And it's on you to understand what you're presenting and the cultural environment that you're in, and to put your best foot forward. And it sounds like you had several of those experiences, not only here coming to America, but then in Japan as well, where you had to do that and you had to overcome that, and your message did have to be strong enough, while you were also trying to focus on reducing the impact that your background came from. So I think that's absolutely fascinating. I think there's so much gold in here for everyone to listen to. So anyway, okay, we're going to wrap up here today. But Carlos, thank you so much.
No, thank you, Jonathan. I hope I've shared some of my experiences that are helpful for people to understand that the world is full of challenges, very complex. And we want to live a life that is happy, knowing that you have an opportunity to break through those challenges that are within your daily life, marriage, children, jobs, getting started in your business, that can be overcome if you make that decision. Take self-evaluation, look for those little triggers that you need to focus on, and tell a good story. And stick with the vision that you have created or where you want to get to, because that's the only thing you're going to have left when you begin to fall, because you will fall. Mm-hmm. But you will get up and continue doing so. Never give up is the message.
I love that. Where can anyone find out more about your company? Are you online? How can someone if they're looking to...
Our website is ipspack.com.
Okay.
ipspack.com.
IPSpack. Okay, ips.com. So if you're interested in innovative packaging solutions, if you have packaging needs, definitely check out the website. And it's really been a pleasure to present your story and talk. So
thank you very much, Jonathan.
I appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. Take care, everyone. Have a good day.